Now, you started working with Hameroff, as I understand it, to try to provide something approximating a localization or a neurophysiological account of what this non-deterministic process might be. And
but I didn't say that's usually non-deterministic. That's different.
okay,
See, it's very easy to confuse the two.
well, and I am confused about them apparently.
Now, you see, non-deterministic means that rules don't have a clear statement about what happens next. And maybe there is a choice about what happens next. And that choice might be random, or maybe choice in some more personal sense, that you have a reason. I don't know. But usually one talks about randomness there. You say that the theory does not have a complete description of what it tells you happens in the future, because there is a random element in it. And the way quantum mechanics...
Random element in the future.
In the future. That's what normally, the way in which one talks about quantum mechanics normally. I mean, I'd have...
Right. And that's a truly random feature. So it's not predictable.
In current quantum mechanics, that's correct, yes.
Okay, so that's what I was referring to when I was referring to the indeterminacy of the future horizon. It was that randomness that I was trying to point to. Yes, well, you see,
I mean, but it is another question. You can have a random device which is otherwise computational. I mean, it just, you put in at certain points, okay, do something randomly. Thing is, I don't think, an interesting question there, I don't think that gives you anything in the way of establishing results which seem to be a non-computational process, like with the Gödel thing.
Okay, so there's an evolutionary answer to the problem of emergent randomness, and the answer is, so a mosquito's a good example.
Yeah.
Or a fish, any animal that lays a tremendous number of eggs that could conceivably march to maturity. So there's genetic mutation in all, so maybe let's say, just for the sake of argument, that a given mosquito lays 1 million eggs, fertile eggs in its lifetime.
Yeah.
Now, there's variation in those mosquito patterns, and at least a certain amount of that variation is random. That's a consequence, and it's actually a consequence, I would say, of events that are actually manifesting themselves in some sense at a quantum level, because at least some of the mutations are caused by radiation, and so there's disruption at a molecular level. And so evolution seems to be able to use the admixture of randomness into structure as a means of dealing with the indeterminacy of the future. And to some degree, it does that through death, right? Because of those 1 million mosquitoes, on average, only one manages to propagate itself to reproduction, or we'd be knee-deep in mosquitoes and like...
No, I understand what you're saying, yes. But what I'm trying to say is that what's going on with consciousness is different from that. Because I don't see how this, you putting randomness in the way you're suggesting, and clearly that is an important aspect to evolution and so on. I certainly wouldn't deny that at all. But it's not the same thing. So that
consciousness isn't producing randomness in response to indeterminacy.
Yes, it's when I say non-computational, I don't mean that it's random at certain times. I mean something quite different.
So what? Okay, let's zero in on that. So, well, because I'm very curious about what you do mean. I mean, this is obviously a tremendously important distinction between the computational algorithmic domain and something that's in some sense outside of it. And I'm struggling to understand at the most detailed level, let's say, how you envision the structure and function of consciousness, or maybe just the function. It's not producing mere random variance. And that can't be, because random is too widespread. So at the very least, so for example, if you study creative people, we've done a lot of this, there's in some sense more randomness in their speech. Because imagine that if you utter a given word, there's a certain probability that another word will emerge in the field around that. The creative people use lower probability concepts and words in their approach. So there's a kind of randomness. They go farther out into the word association field, and that does help them generate more creative solutions. But that's not, if that becomes unconstrained to too great a degree, you get well, maybe like a manic creativity that's counterproductive and too random. People are jumping too much from disconnected point to disconnected point. And so consciousness doesn't seem to be, creative consciousness doesn't seem to be a mere random walk. So that's a psychological take on that. But so what do you think, I'm still struggling to understand what you think consciousness does. It does understand.
Yes. You see, I think probably you're trying to make me be more specific than I can be, because I don't know what it is that, how to make a device that can understand something. So I'm just trying to say that whatever understanding is, it's not a computational process. And that's the argument I'm making.
Okay, I see.
No, it's not.
So you're not trying to specify what it might be. You're just saying it has to be something that's non-computational.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Is there a fundamental link? I mean, when we say it is not non-computational, does that mean, or does that not mean, by definition, that consciousness in some deep level is free?
No,
It does not.
That's right. I'm not saying. I mean, these are open questions. I'm not saying that. I mean, maybe there is an aspect of indeterminism in it, and that could be. But that's not what I'm saying. And the trouble is, I think it's not a concept which people appreciate usually. So I can give you examples of non-computational things, and one of the examples I often give is if you imagine a pattern of squares, equal squares, or just a normal square array, and you can consider a finite shape made out of squares. I think it's called a polyomino, shape made out of squares. And if you're given a finite set of these polyominoes, and the question is, can you cover the plane with those shapes, only those shapes, no gaps, no overlaps? Now that question, the answer yes or no, the answer is definite yes or no. Either you can or you can't. But it's not an algorithmic process. It's shown mathematically that there is no algorithm which can tell you yes or no whether these shapes will cover the plane.
Okay, so when I was talking to my brother-in-law,
Yes.
I was talking to him about these AI systems
Yes.
that learn how to recognize, let's say, cats from photographs. He told me there is no way of algorithmically determining the program that the machine learning systems will eventually apply to the problem of identifying cats in a photograph. But if you let the AI neural networks run and then you analyze their output, you often get something that resembles an algorithmic program as an output that you could have hypothetically calculated if you could have specified the search space. It's something like that. But there's no way of doing that without letting the program do its walk through the domain of cat photographs with its differentially weighted neural network architecture. You can't a priori predict it.
Yeah, well, I still don't think it's the same thing. I mean, I could certainly give it different shapes, and you can say, tell the machine, which of these will tile the plane and which won't. Now, will that learn to give you correct answers?
Well,
Probably, usually it does.
I suppose